90.5.
He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer and the champion of liberty, of human equality. Let's salute him, fellow Ghanaians, the nation's founder, Sajifo Kwame Nkrumah. May God bless him, Ghana showboy, Africa's great son, Sajifo Dr. Nkrumah.
Ago when you come with Makasa Kakra, and so when you come when Tiam Kakra, Menkasapi, Damapa Makade, Bakans Bakakran, and Yamakan Fancy. At long last, the battle has ended. And thus, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. And here again, I want to take the opportunity to thank the chiefs and people of this country, the youth, the farmers, the women, who have so nobly fought and won this battle. Also, I want to thank the valiant ex-servicemen who have so cooperated with me in this mighty task of freeing our country from foreign rule and imperialism. And as I pointed out at our party conference at Sorbonne, I made it quite clear that from now on
we must
90.5 change our attitudes, our minds. We must realize that from now on we are no more a colonial but a free and independent people. But also, as I pointed out, that also entails hard work. I am depending upon the millions of the country, the chiefs and people, to help me to reshape the destiny of this country. We are prepared to build it up and make it a nation that will be respected by every other nation in the world. We know we are going to have difficult beginnings, but again, I am relying upon your support. I'm relying upon your hard work. Seeing you in these thousands, it doesn't matter how far my eye goes. I can see that you are here in your millions. And my last warning to you is that you ought to stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. Today, from now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that, after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just a minute ago, I made it point that we are going to say that we create our own African personality and identity. It's the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle. But today, may I call upon you all that at this great day, Let us all remember that nothing in the world can be done unless it has the purported support of God. We have done the battle, and we again rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. Let us now, fellow Ghanaians, let us now ask for God's blessing. And for only 2 seconds, in your thousands and millions, I want to ask you to pause only for 1 minute and give thanks to Almighty God for having led us through obstacles, difficulties, imprisonment, hardship and suffering to have brought us to the end of our
He has labored, he has suffered to lead
well,
his
it is a
people
beautiful
into
Saturday
the land of
morning
freedom.
here, a voice you would regularly not hear on this show. But let me say once again that I would want to welcome you to the mother of all talk shows here in Ghana. My name is Peter Bamfo, and I'm sitting in for your regular host, Samuel Eshen. And today there's a lot that we're going to be discussing on the show. And this is what I would want you to do, to be an active listener, but not just a passive one. You have been told to be citizens and not spectators. And this morning, my admonition to you is that you will be an active listener, of course, on the show, and not just a passive one. Remember that on Saturdays, the show, which is Alhaji and Alhaji, is normally carried live across affiliates stations in Sekbele, that's on 104.3 in Likbe, on Shine 96.9 FM in Akachi, and of course on Lukusi Radio 96.1 FM in Vegolokwati, on Radio Pando 102.5. And for those of you who are online, we're live on your TuneIn application, that's Radio Gold F 90.5 FM. And in London, we're listened to live on GFM Radio and, of course, on SAPS Radio as well. Remember that the numbers for you to join the show will be announced as we progress with the rest of the program. But let me take you through the headlines of the papers for this morning, after which I will come back to introduce the topics for discussion this morning, by which time our guest will be seated before the show to start. Let me start off with the Daily Guide newspaper this morning that says NDC on fire over Mahama 2020 agenda. Tension rises at Asawasi over police killing. Pathologist summoned over JB's autopsy report, and Nana storms Abosokai excited with Zoom Lion. Remember, the president has been touring some parts of the Greater Accra region as part of his 3-day official tour of the region. The Daily Guide says security man jailed 15 years for 1.5 million Ghana cedi ATM theft, 30,000 mental health cases cannabis induced. Mahama responds to regional chairman yesterday. For those of you who managed to follow this particular story on social media, I'm sure you would have seen the response from the office of the former vice president, the former president, John Dramani Mahama, with respect to the visit by the 10 regional chairmen of the National Democratic Congress, and of course the fallouts of that particular visit, which generated a lot of issues and concerns, both on social media and of course on mainstream media. No more payroll fraud. AG charges controller and accountant general staff. The Ghanaian Times says Gaming Commission clamps down on slot machine operators. 400 jackpots destroyed. And this particular exercise, we're told, was carried out in Sawam. Let me just read a bit of that story for you by Riza Sambo. And the story reads, the Gaming Commission of Ghana yesterday destroyed about 400 jackpot machines at Nsawam in the eastern region in efforts to clamp down on illegal gaming operations. The monitoring team of the Ghana Gaming Commission, including the police, seized the analog slot machines from operators in some part of the central region, Brongahafo region, Western Ashanti, and Greater Accra regions. Now, addressing the media after the exercise, the Commissioner of GCG, Mr. Peter Mreku, stated that operators of the machine will be prosecuted. He indicated that his outfit was poised on raising the standard of gaming in the country, adding that cracking down on such illegal operations was a priority of the commission. And so that's it with the clamp down by the Ghana Gaming Commission. I'm sure this will put a lot of these illegal operators out of business. But let's see how it goes. I am particularly glad that there's an assurance from the Ghana Gaming Commission that they are going to prosecute those who are involved with these illegal operations. The Spectator newspaper says health workers ridicule us, physically challenged, pregnant women complain. Check your land title registration. Read all of that on page 32 and 38 of today's Spectator newspaper. So those are the headlines of the papers. Remember once again that we are live on Sekpele 104.3 FM in Likpe, on Shine 96.9 FM in Akachi, on Lukusi Radio 96.1 FM in Vegolokwati, on Radio Kpando 102.5. And of course, for those of you in London, we are live on GFM Radio and on sapsradio.com. Remember, you can also tune in on your TuneIn application and listen to the show live. Now, today we're going to be looking at a critical analysis of the undersubscribed energy bond and its impact, of course, on revenue generation and allied concerns. Remember that this week, the issue of the bond that was issued by the Finance Ministry became a subject of discussion. Remember that the minority also came out with a statement or held a press conference to highlight some of the reasons they believe accounted for the undersubscription of that bond by the Ministry of Finance. Now, aside that as well, we are going to have a thorough discussion on the free SHS policy, the implementation, the performance, and of course, the challenges. Remember that the Minister of Education statement that the NDC government did not release funding to finance its progressively free SHS policy, and of course the related matters as well. Now we would, as part of our third issue, discuss the concerns of the commercial drivers and their challenges with the Ghana Police Service to organize a demonstration. These are optional topics that we're going to be looking at, and the colleges of teacher associations of Ghana strike, demanding for their 9 months unpaid allowances. Remember, when they met with the Ministry of Finance, they were not giving any serious assurance. We'll look at that as well, and what you also make of those issues. We'll pick a few more sound bites. Now, when we return, I would introduce my panelist for this morning's discussion, and then we can kickstart the discussion. Now, a leading medical specialist medical center in Accra is looking for administrative assistant, an experienced nurse, and of course a healthcare assistant clinical. For immediate engagement, please contact the administrative manager. That's on 0302 050631880 or 0549262100. The deadline is 12 noon Wednesday, 15th November 2017. Let me pick that again, that a leading specialist medical center in Accra is looking for an administrative assistant, an experienced nurse, and a healthcare assistant, clinical. Now, for immediate engagement, please contact the administrative manager on 0302631880 or 0549262100. The deadline is 12 noon on Wednesday, November 15th, 2017. So, if you qualify for any of these positions that I have mentioned, do well to call the numbers that I have already given out. Let's pick a few more sound bites. When we return, we will kickstart the discussion. My name once again is Peter Bamfo.
Dr. Gachi, these points you make about, the ESLA PLC and all of that, is it that government did not foresee that this was how investors were going to feel about the vehicle they are using?
Well, they have to answer whether they have foreseen that or not, but it was very clear. Even the composition of the secretariat or whatever the board that should manage the EXLA, who are the people in that board? You remember the EXLA is actually government revenue. So you are collecting government revenue into a certain structure, and you want to let the investor believe that that structure is a private entity, that the borrowing should be treated as a corporate activity. That is misleading to investors who are familiar with some of these things. So they should have known, but I think they will be in the best position to say whether they know that or not. But for me, that is a problem, and investors would definitely react to that, and they have reacted.
Now, you have hinted that government should tread cautiously in its preparation of the budget for 2018, and you caution government in the sense that, look, it's not been able to meet its revenue targets, and so most of its huge programs that it wants to embark upon, they should look at it well. What's informing this?
Well, it is very clear. I think you are aware that this week alone, you see the apprehension by the Revenue Authority that at last minute they want to do things to see if they can show up revenue. You see that one of the important places that the president visited yesterday at Tema Harbour, and then you were talking about issues of revenue. You heard the finance minister talking about that and even indicated that the tax to GDP ratio has gone down. So there is a clear concern. At the back of this clear concern, you also see a lot of pipeline of expenditure in the 2017 budget and by the actions of the government. All these things clearly will actually put burden on us. And remember, in 2018, Labour will be very active in trying to take what belongs to them from the government. I remember in 2018, the young people of Ghana will be very active in terms of demanding jobs that should be created for them. I remember in 2018, arrears which have been accumulated, which were not paid, these things will continue to be a problem. And remember, we have paid only 20% of the payment that is needed to finance the free SHS program. 80% is outstanding. And as we speak, all the activity going on in terms of cooking for the children, other services are on arrears. So if you look at all these things, it should be very clear to you that there are challenges that we are going to face in 2018.
But can the counter-argument not be made?
And that does not mean that nothing will be moving on in the country. That's not what I was talking about.
But can the counter-argument not be made that, look, with the ITLOS ruling, Ghana has an opportunity to sink more wells. Wells that were previously not functioning are now going to function, and so there will be money coming from the oil sector.
No, that is not enough. Are you aware of the number of oil-related projects which are on hold now? And they are going to create even an overrun in terms of expenditure because we don't have money to fill the gap. So that is not the answer at all. That will bring in more revenue, but that revenue is not enough. You see, we should just look at the pipeline of expenditure items that we have created and we continue to create. And I believe in 2018 budget, we are going to create more. See, even if the way we are going, even if we increase revenue mobilization by 50%, it will not be able to fill the gap. That is a challenge we are facing, and we need to address them as quickly as possible.
The government has been...
There are many ministries, agencies, strategic agencies whose budgets were not released up to 30%, and we are ending the year. So that is the reality.
In all of this conversation, the business sector, the private sector also plays a very important role because they as the engine of growth, when there is vibrancy in the system, then some of these issues about revenue generation would not be a matter of concern. The government says that by now, they have been able to stabilize the economy. And so by next year, God willing, we should be seeing some improvement in the economy. Should that not be one of the factors we should be looking at?
That is an ideal, normal situation. But we have recorded growth in the economy, but the growth is not responding to revenue generation. So why do we give ourselves that expectation? I think we need to face the reality on the ground. We have reduced VAT from 17.5% to about 3% for a certain segment of taxpayers. But the reality is the majority of those people who should benefit from that and the expectation of government that by so doing it will rake in more revenue. Majority of those people are not registered with the authority and they are not paying the tax. These are the things we should be tackling.
Doc, we are grateful you made time to speak to us this morning.
Thank you too.
I just want to create a very simple scenario. You go for a football match, first round, you get 21%. Is that not the case? They got 702. You get 21%. You ask for a rematch, and still you come home beating. So the rematch, I did better. I almost scored a goal. I mean, what logic is this? This is Bawo logic. You see, you went to raise an amount of money. You told the investors when you wanted to raise the money. On that day, they said they won't give you the money. You then extend by another week, go to their offices, and now you are begging them to save you from disgrace. For one whole week, you are begging them. That was what was happening. It's not as if people were just calling. They were now moving from houses and offices and begging investors. They'll call you and say, oh, this is your good friend, and even still, you ended up the way we did. When did you see a rematch in bond matches in Ghana? When was the first time you saw a bond rematch? For the first time. You see, you people have to tell Dr. Baumia one thing. He learned economics at O level. Is that not it? Economics at A level. First degree, master's, PhD. Came and worked at the Bank of Ghana as a central banker. He still doesn't understand the economy. And he talks about GPS and insults our former president, who himself is the man who is credited for the transformation in the Telecom and ICT Center as a Minister of Communications. So today we are dealing with an economy managed by an overhyped economic team. The main striker, Dr. Baumia, can't even score half a goal. And when you talk, they give you CVs. They'll tell you that on the flanks there's a Harvard-trained midfielder, and then there's a Yale-trained finance. He is playing at the right back. And then they'll tell you that Osiadeyo or Safumafo is in holding midfield. Then we'll tell you what is your ball possession after first half, 21%. How many goals did you score? You scored 0. That is the reality. Please, You see, we want the people of Ghana to understand the economic management team we have. The days when you can go to Malata market and buy onions and tomatoes and calculate inflation is gone. And everybody who has learned economy know that there's nothing like Malata inflation. But Baumia calculated Malata inflation after his wife asked him to buy onions and tomatoes. And you journalists praised him for embarrassing Ghana. The academia kept quiet when he was polluting our students. Today, you see where he has sent us. We are now a laughing stock. I just came from Tanzania, and you'll be surprised that a very key senior figure was telling us that Baumia came to Mauritius and was bragging. That's what your colleagues see you in the eyes of your colleagues. Please, we are doing serious business. They rode on the back of the confidence of the economy that the NDC left to raise a bond of $2.25 billion in 4 hours. In April, when you're not here, they did it in 4 hours. What has now happened that in 1 month, they still cannot raise it? You see, they are destroying the fundamentals that we developed for them. When they were having honeymoon, January, February, March, they came here and they were taking credit. We told them they should wait. Their time will come. The time has come. We have been embarrassed. They are using a special purpose vehicle that is riskier than any other instrument. Look, go and look at the balance sheet of ESLA PLC after raising the bond. It is negative 3.6 billion. That is the balance sheet. Is that not it? Do they have any asset on that balance sheet? Tell me which investor will put his money in a company that starts with a negative 3.6 billion. It is only under the best economists that the world has ever produced. Dr. Mahmoud Baumia. And I'm sure tomorrow he will grant another interview that is reminiscent of when he was a running mate. But now as a vice president, walk the talk. My big brother mentioned the point that he couldn't understand very basic mathematics. He has never understood the economy of Ghana. He has always lied about the economy of Ghana. You recall he said that our debt was about 36 billion and we end at $40 billion. When he came here with his budget, they said it was around 26 billion. How did His Excellency John Dramani Mahama miraculously find $14 billion to pay down the debt in 3 months before we left office? And you never asked him. He took you for a ride. He took the people of Ghana for a ride. But the reality is that he knows nothing, but he's so confident and eloquent, he can confuse all of you. But the reality is he's not managing the economy. So we'll walk the talk and see where we are. But this bond, I doubt if the 4 billion, they will attempt it again because they won't get a third rematch. Investors are already away from it. Thank you.
Well, I had, if you read the article that I wrote, I had indicated quite clearly that this was an incompetent handling issue. I had raised the issue that the government was basically using a strategy that you use to sell a car to sell tomatoes. And clearly, if you decide to use a strategy that you use to sell a car to sell tomatoes, you would fail. You are issuing a bond and you are using a vehicle that makes the bond so risky that it becomes a very risky bond. And normally when you are issuing a risky bond, investors expect a risk premium. They expect you either to give them guarantees or that you would then have to pay a little more. It's a very basic principle in finance that the higher the risk, the higher the return. That is why the microfinance companies that take deposits, because they are risky, they pay you a lot of, interest. And so if you lose your money, you lose all. If you gain much. So once you are using a risky vehicle that you call the special purpose vehicle, you definitely have to cover the risk. And they were not willing to cover the risk. But they were selling this bond and making the public and the investors to believe that this was a risk-free bond. And yet the questions that surround the risk of this bond, you haven't been able to explain away. One, you are using resources from ESLA. And ESLA is the energy sector levy, which is a tax that is imposed on the people of Ghana to pay for this bond. Now, don't forget that any tax issue is a policy matter. And so any new government that decides that its tax policy is with the application of ESLA. For instance, when MPP came, they said that certain taxes were nuisance, and they cut them. What it simply means is that in their view, those taxes were not consistent with the tax policy, so they scrapped them. So it means that if another government comes and decides that ESLA as a tax policy is inconsistent with its objective, and therefore it wants to scrap ESLA, what happens to the special purpose vehicle? Will it get the money to pay the bond? It won't get. So if it doesn't get, what happens to investors who are holding that piece of paper? What will they get? So that is a major question that this bond failed to answer. The other second issue is that once you have a situation like that, then you must have a way to give assurance to the investor that, okay, assuming that ESLA doesn't come, somebody else will make sure that you get your money. Now, that person ought to have some assets that he can use to guarantee you. Unfortunately, you have registered a new company called ESLA PLC, which you said is a special purpose vehicle. Do you know the office of ESLA PLC? Does ESLA PLC even have an office? Who are the directors? Who is the managing director of ESLA PLC? You ask a very basic question. Apart from the letterhead on which you find the name ESLA, what else can you get that is an asset of ESLA that you can lay on and recover your money? Nothing.
All right, Honorable. Let me seek clarity on a few of the issues you raised. You talked about the bond being a risky bond. You've explained why it is a risky bond in the sense that when governments change, this is a government policy, and so the other government could decide to change it. But what measures could have been taken by this government in terms of the vehicle to mitigate that risk element in the issuance of this bond?
Yes, and that is what we advise them. Because the ESLA PLC that you are using is a vehicle that doesn't have any strength on its own. It's also a vehicle that is using a resource that spans several governments to finance this transaction. You needed to then issue this bond as what we call the plain vanilla, as a normal government bond. Now, when you issue it as a normal government bond, indirectly, government has guaranteed that bond. And therefore, any investor putting his money there is aware that even if a new government decides that on a tax policy basis they want to change and scrap ESLA, it will still be committed to the debt because it is a government of Ghana debt. Now you are saying it is not a government of Ghana debt, but it is ESLA PLC's debt. Now if it is ESLA PLC's debt, what animal is called ESLA PLC? What has it got to pay me back if ESLA is terminated? So they needed to then issue this bond as a government of Ghana bond. Now what that then means is that it would have taken advantage of Ghana's rating as a country, Ghana's credibility, Ghana's image to bring down the interest that investors will be asking because it will now be a risk-free bond. And as a risk-free bond, the interest in it will sour. You see, people were buying the 2.25 billion bond not because it was Ken Oforiatta or Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia who was issuing the bond. No. They were buying it because it was government of Ghana that was raising the money as a government of Ghana debt. And therefore, they knew that once they bought that bond, all successive governments are enjoined to service and pay for that debt. And you refuse. The IMF. And you see, people think that IMF is just the office you see in Accra. The IMF is made up on its books a register of several experienced consultants across the world on the subject matter of financial management of countries and institutions. And they consult these experts across the world who have had experience with this type of arrangement to get advice from them. And all the people they consulted returned with the verdict that special purpose vehicles are risky, investors don't like special purpose vehicles, and because of that, this should be issued as a public debt. The government insisted beyond all the good counsel that if they wanted to do it with a special purpose vehicle. And you ask the question, what exactly were they trying to achieve? That they don't want to put it on the public debt. But the IMF says that when I'm doing your debt sustainability analysis, I will still consider it a public debt anyway. So what you attempt to avoid putting it on a public debt by not issuing it as a government debt to bring down the risk and the interest, but in the end you end up having it being added to your debt sustainability analysis. So at the end of the day, as a government,
if this is not intransigent, if this is not arrogant, if this is not ignorant, tell me what exactly this is. And the man in the seat, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, is the man who is the head of the economic management team. And he could not see through this very basic principle.
He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer and the champion of liberty, of human equality. Let's salute him, fellow Ghanaians, the nation's founder, Sergeant Kwame Nkrumah. May God bless him, Ghana showboy, Africa's great son, Sergeant Dr.
Well, you're welcome back from that break. And let me once again say that the text lines for you to join the show 0233 995 905. 0233 995 905. For those of you on Facebook, you can leave your messages. That's on our Facebook page, 90.5 FM. And of course, on Twitter, we are at Radio Gold 905 FM. Now, mind you once again that we are on Sekwele 104.3 in FM in Likpe and on Shine 96.9 FM in Akachi, Lukusi Radio 96.1 FM in Vego Lokwati, on Radio Bando, that's on 102.5 FM on SAPS Radio, and of course for those of you in London, we are live on GFM Radio. If you are using an Android phone, you can just go into your app store and download the TuneIn application, where you can get us live there as well. Let me introduce the guest I have for the show, after which I would run through the topics for discussion this morning. Mr. Kwesi Pratt Jr. is the managing editor of the Insight newspaper. Dr. David Percy is a student of history and politics. Mr. Bernard Mona is the national chairman of the PNC, and Honorable Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa is a former deputy minister of education and a member of parliament for the North Tongue constituency, as well as the ranking member on foreign affairs. The issues I have already given you, but let me just run you through them. This morning we're going to have a critical analysis of the undersubscribed energy bond and its impact on revenue generation and allied concerns. We would also thoroughly look at the free SHS policy implementation, the performance and challenges. The Minister of Education's statement that the NDC government did not release funding to finance its progressively free education policy. And would also look at the concerns of commercial drivers and their challenges with the Ghana Police to organize a demonstration. And the Colleges of Education's Association of Ghana's strike. They are demanding for their 9 months unpaid allowances to be paid them. Remember, they have met with the Ministry of Finance, but they are claiming that they have not received any serious assurances from the government. For that matter, they are going to stay home until government decides to attend to them. So those are the issues that we are going to be looking at this morning. Once I have my panelists seated, we'll just kickstart the conversation. Let me start off with you, Mr. Bernard Mona. We're looking at the energy bond and why government was not able to meet the subscription it expected.
Peter, thank you. And also, good morning to co-panelists, particularly Ablakwa, I have not seen in a very long while. For Uncle Kwesi, we meet almost all the time. First and foremost, let me take the moment to applaud the Deputy Minister for Finance, Honorable Kweku Kwarteng, who has come to confirm something that I've always held and have spoken very vehemently about, that the IMF is not a panacea to our economic difficulties. And I want to salute Kweku Kwarteng for possibly being bold in stating that the IMF is not God, to want to dictate for government what the government would want to do, or what type of instruments the government of Ghana should put in place. And I think that this realization, for me, is beginning to show that our governments are beginning, or government officials are beginning to come to the painful reality that indeed the IMF does not represent the solutions to our economic difficulties. And I hope that the position that Kweku Kwarteng is holding on the IMF will be a general position by government, not just he as Kweku Kwarteng, that his boss, the minister, will hold the same view, and that President Nana Akufo-Addo will hold the same view. If we do that, I am sure that we will extricate ourselves from this bondage that we have kept ourselves in. It is not imposed on us, but we run into it. And when we extricate ourselves, we'll be able to understand that our economy can run without the interference of the IMF or the World Bank. Indeed, in this country, the evidence is there that between 1973 to 1975, under the Achampon regime, the IMF and the World Bank bagged the baggage and left the shores of this country because Achampon delivered what they describe as the Yentuach speech. And they could not sit with the fact that President Achampon then decided that we will not pay our debts to the rest of the world. They packed bag and baggage. The economic and social programs that were instituted made Ghana a self-sufficient country. We were able to produce much beyond our own consumption. We were exporting maize. We were exporting over 30,000 tons of sugar and many other things. And that the Ghanaians' income was capable of meeting their expenditure because almost every Ghanaian had a backyard garden. You could put tomatoes, you could put pepper, so that the basic things that we were acquiring with our income, we stopped buying them because now we're producing them on our own. And we're reducing also largely on our import bill. Don't forget that the import bill has a very huge telling on our terms of trade. And terms of trade has its effect on the balance of payment. So anytime you see that your terms of trade are deteriorating, it means that you are having much more imports than of export. And when you import, it means that it's expenditure, and when you export, it is revenue. So when imports supersedes that of exports, clearly it means that your economy is surviving on much more borrowing than it is. So I take the moment again to congratulate Kweku Kwarteng for venting out and letting the people of Ghana know that indeed the IMF is not God. I hope that he can stand by it. Having said that, the question is, since when did we get to know that the IMF is not God? Because economic policy after policy, ever since we subscribed to the IMF and the World Bank, we have seen that what they have done is that they give us omnibus policy. What they have done in some country, they will bring it here. And the evidence abound that, look, the IMF and World Bank have not been able to salvage any economy anywhere in the world. Start from Bolivia and end in the Uganda. They will praise you for good policies that are transient, and in no time you see that the consequences on your nation are so telling. So evidently, the IMF has never been the solution to any nation's difficulty. So it was at this point that the government of Ghana decided that they maybe needed policy confidence from the IMF, and decided that the IMF to give a thumbs up in the raising of a loan from the international community, which they normally, these days, instead of calling it a loan for all of us to understand, they describe it as a bond. And it's still the same thing, it's a loan. So you go out there to raise a loan, you commit the people of Ghana to a loan, and in committing the people of Ghana, the fundamental, the basis for which we are raising the loan is that we have energy sector levy. And before we put up the energy sector levy, we as a nation had decided that we have huge debts hanging on the energy sector, about 2.4 billion indebtedness to the energy sector. And that the only way the energy sector will become solvent and liquid to be able to carry on its own operations and not suffer any collapse in the shortest time was that we should be able to defray our indebtedness to the energy sector. As a consequence, the government decided that they should set up a levy that all Ghanaians should contribute into. And if you take the levy, which they describe as energy sector levy, and they have christened it as ESLA, what it means is that Ghanaians will pay this levy. It will be collected by the government of Ghana, and annually you are expected to raise about 3.6 million Ghana cedis or so into the sector. Now, that is supposed to be used in 4 years to defray the debt that we owe the energy sector. So, clearly, from anybody's perspective, what the government of Ghana put in place, I think under President Mahama, is that we have identified that we have a problem and that we should levy ourselves so that we overcome this challenge. We have decided through Parliament to pass this act so that we levy ourselves. We have already started paying the levy. So the energy sector is no more burdened because we are raising the revenue so that we can clear the debt. So therefore, you cannot say that this particular indebtedness to the energy sector is rising. It is actually falling now because year on or year in, year out, we have decided to tax ourselves, to cut some portions of our monies so that we'll be able to defray this. Question then is, why are you going to take a bond to come and pay something that the people of Ghana are already taxing themselves to pay? We have levied ourselves to pay, and we have committed ourselves that in 4 years we should clear our own indebtedness. Why do you go out there to raise a loan to come and pay what we are already paying, if it is not for some other purposes? So if you say that you are going out there to raise money to come and clear the energy sector debt, I am a bit confused as to why we will be doing this. Then what it means is that absorb the people of Ghana from paying the ESLA, because government's way of solving this solution, the problem, is to go out there to raise money. Which money the people of Ghana will pay. So we are doing double payment. We are being levied, we are clearing the sector, and at the same time we are taking a bond with higher interest that we will pay in the next 10 years. So it's a bit of confusion. At the end of the day, what the government of Ghana has decided is that they do not want this debt to come into the books of government of Ghana so that our debt stock will increase. So what they have decided, quote, intelligently, is that let us create what we call a special purpose vehicle. And that special purpose vehicle is that they are going to take the taxes or the levies that we have imposed on ourselves and use that as a company, a public limited liability company. That's what we mean by PLC. So they have turned our levy as a public limited liability company. The directors of the public limited liability company are not known. The managers of that are not known. As we speak, you do not have anything. There is no even secretariat for that ESLA PLC. That's why maybe Honorable Adongo said that the only asset that ESLA PLC has is its letterhead. And that having gone out there to raise some money, now if you check the balance sheet, you will have negative 3.6 million. Because they have zero assets. Even those who are the owners of the PLC are not known. Now you float this to the international community and you tell the international community to buy it. And you are asking the IMF to endorse your PLC so as to give confidence so that people can purchase the bond. The IMF said, no, we can't do it. If you were issuing this as a government of Ghana bond, the government of Ghana is a continuum. Whether it is NDC, it is MPP, it is PNC, or it is Kominini, it will continue to be the government of Ghana. And therefore, if the government of Ghana is owing anybody, irrespective of which political party comes in, that government will pay. Because the transaction was done in the name of the government of Ghana by officials of the nation, and therefore it will be paid whether you like it or not. That will give confidence. The other confidence that it will give is that, look, over the past 25 years, in the sub-region of Ghana, or West Africa, Ghana has been seen as a stable democracy that has seen changes of government, including incumbents losing elections and accepting the results and moving on. Every investor is looking for the opportunity where their investment will be safe. So that one alone is sufficient goodwill to enable you to sell your bond and to enlist confidence into the transaction. But if you go and set up what you call ESLA PLC, at the same time that you are setting ESLA PLC, you have made the international community to understand that some taxes or levies that were put in place by the previous government, you, upon assumption of office, immediately went and cancelled them. What are you telling the investor community? You are telling them that the next government can come and cancel ESLA and say that, look, we have paid our energy sector debt, so we don't need ESLA again. What would happen to their investment? Because ESLA is not captured as a government of Ghana. You are setting as a private limited liability company, despite that we are hearing that the Minister for Finance is the supervising agency. So nobody will take confidence in this. So I am not surprised that the bond could not generate the necessary momentum, and at the end of the day it was a flop. And maybe this is the first time we are doing the same bond twice. As Honorable Adongo put it, we played the first half, we did not score any goal. So we are playing a second half. But we said that we did well because the first half we had 21% ball possession. I mean, you know, it is shocking. Now, what you have said, and this is that you are asking its impact on revenue generation and allied concerns. I am not sure that energy generation, revenue generation in this country should be hinged on borrowing and the rolling out of bonds. President Akufo-Addo and Vice President Mahamudu Bawumia, prior to becoming President and Vice President, had indicated to us all that we have all it takes. We don't need to borrow from anywhere. And I concur fully with them that this nation has so much resources that we don't need to go out anywhere to borrow. I agree with President Akufo-Addo and the Vice President. And indeed, the Vice President even went further to indicate that he has worked in the Bank of Ghana and he knows that we have so much in this country that we don't need to borrow. Mr. Vice President, you are no more a deputy governor of Bank of Ghana. You are no more a running mate. You are the vice president of this country and the head of the economic management team of Ghana. The money and resources that working as a deputy governor, you know, we have, now should be made available to the people of Ghana for our development and our problems, and not that we should now be borrowing when you have told the rest of us that this nation can survive on its own without borrowing. What has happened to all the knowledge, all the information that you had when you were governor, and you told us that having worked as a deputy governor, you are very much aware that we have money in this country, we don't need to borrow money. Why are we borrowing today? If everything you told us we are to believe, why are we borrowing today? Or it was to hoodwink us into believing that you had the magic wand to liberate our nation from the suffocating debt, and only to come to even increase our indebtedness. I think that there is something wrong there. Look, we can generate revenue if we retool our extractive sector. Professor Akilakpa Sawyer has done so much work on the mining sector in this country. And when you see the report, you ask questions. Why are we sitting down on so much money? And yet, we are not taking advantage of it. I have said this. Every day when you get up and they talk about GDP, and that our GDP is growing, I cannot argue about the growth of GDP. It is true, it is possible that our GDP is growing. But we must understand the reason why people will be using GDP, because it doesn't represent national interests. Why? Let's take a three-sector economy where we deal with cocoa, gold, and oil. So 100% of cocoa production, 100% of gold production, 100% of oil production, irrespective of who are the owners. When we sum these three sectors, will amount to our GDP. That is what is called our GDP. Now, if you take the gold sector, Ghana owns less than 5%. Ghana, we own less than 5%. So anybody comes into our country, they get a concession, they start producing, and all we get is tax and royalty. If you go to the oil sector, but for President Mills, we had only 10% out of 100. President Mills had to fight to take the 3% that EO was offloading from Cosmos. And that's how come we have 13%. So 87% of our oil is not for Ghana and it's not for Ghanaians. About 60% of our cocoa is not for us. So when you sum all these things and come and tell us that this is the rate at which our GDP is growing, after those nationals and owners have taken their share out of the GDP, what will you be left with as a nation? You'll be talking about 5% from the gold sector. You'll be talking about 13% from the oil sector and maybe 40% from the cocoa sector. That is what will be left of Ghana. And so when you're talking about these mega figures, macroeconomic indicators, what is its real impact on citizens' life and welfare? That is what we should be worried about. And so I am not in a position to say our GDP is not growing. It's growing, but it's growing in the wrong path. Because those who are benefiting are not the Ghana economy or the Ghanaian. So it is important that we take note that yes, GDP and whatever we are talking about is not sufficient to prove that our nation's economy is doing well. So we need to re-engineer our extractive sectors to get back to the days when Achampong was in office, where it was possible for Ghana to own over 51% of our natural resources. So that at any point in time when there is some extraction and we are suffering depletion of our resources, we do know that there will be more than 51%. But in effect, our revenue generation cannot be hinged on borrowing. And I think that it is important that we get to know this as early as possible. It is not the case that all advices that we take from the Bretton Woods institutions should be swallowed hook, line, and sinker. I have the strong belief that our various state ownership, when managed properly, will be capable of generating revenue. As it stands now, what we are having is that almost every sector that is allowed to exist today is a service sector. They don't produce anything, and they don't generate any revenue or sufficient revenue. Right from the military to the police, all of them are consuming agencies. It is important to look at other sectors of our nation that will generate the revenue to support the work of all these institutions. Anything short of that will be the annual auctioning of our country in the name of issuing bonds. And now that we are getting choked in the market, that we even have to convert our own levies that we are paying to become a company without assets, but only liabilities. I think that when that is done, we'll generate the revenues that is required to move this nation to the level that we want.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Bernard Mona. He's the chairman of the People's National Convention. I'll move on to you, Honorable Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa.
Good morning to you. Good morning to the panel. And Bernard is right that we haven't met in a while. Good to see him. And good to see Uncle Kwesi and Dr. David Pesci. Good morning to all distinguished listeners of Radio God. I haven't been here in a while. It's good to be back. And I'm glad that the good Lord gave us this day. Permit me to send very warm regards to the chiefs and people of the North Tongue constituency. We have had an amazing week. We were able to donate furniture and some other educational materials to students and teachers to alleviate the stress which the Free SHS program had brought about at the Bato Secondary School and the Mefa Senkizito Senior High School. On Thursday, we also managed to solve major health challenges that we have at the Bato Catholic Hospital. We did a massive donation in excess of 100,000 Ghana cedis, donating sets of incubators, autoclave machines, phototherapy machines, and operating theater beds and other equipments. The children's ward at the hospital did not have an incubator. Now we have solved that problem. So it's been an exciting week for us in North Tongue. And I want to thank the chiefs and people, the assembly members, the DC, and everybody. We are working together to make sure that in our own small way, we can improve the living conditions of our people. Now, this morning's discussion, which you have rightfully titled A Critical Analysis of the Undersubscribed Energy Bond and its Impact on Revenue Generation and Allied Concerns. I must immediately state that I come to this discussion as a very, very ordinary citizen. These days we are told that if you don't have a PhD in economics, you shouldn't talk about economic matters. So that has been the response of government after our press conference. So I must quickly provide a proviso that just a layman, I'm not a PhD holder. I don't know anything about economics, and I didn't attend university in Canada, so I must put that on record very quickly and appeal that perhaps listeners will bear with the ignorance that we may share. This is a matter that I will return to later. Having said that, we do know that the government announced at the end of auction that the effort to raise an initial target of 6 billion Ghana cedis to settle the energy sector debt. The government put out the results of the bond. There were 2 bonds that government sought to raise. There was a 7-year bond, and the target was 2.4 billion Ghana cedis. Gold. The government announced at the end of the auction that it met the 2.4 billion Ghana cedis as targeted at an interest rate of 19%. The second bond, which is a 10-year bond, we are told failed to hit the 3.6 billion Ghana cedis mark. Government announced that the country had raised 2.29 billion Ghana cedis out of the 3.6 billion cedi that was targeted, a shortfall of some 22%. The coupon rate, we have been informed, for the 10-year bond is 19.5%. Clearly, no matter how you want to describe this, it is clear that government could not meet its target. Government could not meet its objective. Some have described the energy bond as an energy bomb. Some have said government failed. Some have used more diplomatic terminology that government could not meet its targets. Government had shortfalls. No matter how you put it, it is clear that the attempt to raise this 6 billion cedi bond clearly had not gone as expected. Questions therefore arise. Why did we not succeed in meeting our target? You will recall that as far back as 4 months ago, we in the minority, at the time led by our leader, the Honorable Haruna Idriso, raised concerns about how government was going about wanting to raise this energy sector bond. We talked about the fact that if you look at the energy sector levy, there was an understanding that this would not be a permanent levy. It was a levy that will have a sunset clause, and indeed had sunset clauses, so that by 5 years maximum, we're looking at a period 4 to 5 years, and we had sat with the banks, when I say we, the previous government had sat with the banks and had an understanding that within a period of 5 years, the energy sector levies would be adequate in clearing the energy sector debt, so that the energy sector levy would then be dropped because it will have served its purpose. So the minority served notice at the time, if you recall, that this energy sector levy, we do not think that it is fair to the taxpayer to stretch it for 10 years, for 15 years, as the government was saying at the time. Clearly, this disagreement between the leading political parties who can form a government at any point in time, at least if you're looking at current political realities, the NPP and NDC. Government's inability to respond to this, the current government's inability to respond to this concern and to assure the market, the capital market, that there will be certainty. Because we had served notice that, God willing, if we return to power in 2020, we were going to stick to our original plan that the energy sector levy should not go beyond 2020. Now you have a situation where this government was clearly mortgaging a lot beyond a 10-year period. And I will soon return to even this conduct of the current government, which clearly smacks of double standards, because we must bear in mind what they said about this energy sector levy when we first mooted the idea. So the point I'm making is that there was considerable uncertainty. And when you go to the capital market and there's uncertainty, investors are not clear in their minds whether this whole energy sector arrangement would last. The government, instead of building consensus, working with us, coming to Parliament so that we can have an arrangement in the national interest on how long the energy sector levy should remain in our statute books, how long, what should be the duration of this tax. The government rather dismissed us in the usual very snobbish that, we can, they don't read, just ignore them. And so we were ignored. Certainly this contributed to the uncertainty. The second issue which we raised, which is a very fundamental issue, we said that this special purpose vehicle you have created, called ESLA PLC, you ought to come to Parliament and give ESLA PLC some backing, some legal backing. ESLA PLC is not known to our laws, is not known to Parliament. It does not have legal basis. And so you created a special purpose vehicle that was not valued, that really had no relevance to investors. Investors looked at that ESLA PLC monster and had no, as it were, very little interest. There was really no credibility in that vehicle that was created. And again, our caution that ESLA PLC should be brought to Parliament for there to be parliamentary approval, for there to be a parliamentary stamp, was ignored. Certainly, this also contributed to the failure that we are discussing this morning. Then there was also the issue, if you recall, of how this whole bond issuance should be structured. Because the government did not want this loan facility, and this bond, as you know, is a kind of loan. Government did not want this to impact on our debt to GDP ratio. That is why it had to create a corporate entity, a separate entity, so that it will not affect our debt to GDP ratio. And you will recall that the government had running battles with the IMF. The IMF said that, look, this really, you are just trying to fudge the issues and be smart and all of that. It's still debt owed by the state anyway, regardless of what kind of vehicle or what kind of arrangement you use. So certainly the approach by government to adopt a corporate bond mechanism instead of a sovereign bond mechanism added to its woes. Because what then happened is that the bond was issued as a corporate bond. Finally, that's what happened. It was issued as a corporate bond and not as a sovereign bond. So you issued this bond as a corporate bond, very weak structures, no parliamentary backing. ESLA PLC had not been rated. This is the result. So government intransigence, government's inability to show leadership, to carry the country along, and to listen to all sides on this matter, and to build consensus. They know it all. Everybody else can go to hell. This is what led us to where we are. And mind you, these concerns we raised were not raised only by the minority. I heard the head of the business school, Professor Bokpin, at the University of Ghana, who raised similar concerns. The IMF raised these concerns. Many economists raised these concerns that if care was not taken, we were in for a disastrous showing. We were ignored, and this is where we are. But Peter, even more disconcerting is the fact that despite the claim by government that because it did not, and I've heard government communicators say that they did not want to issue a Donkomi bond with a high interest rate, a high coupon rate, and that is why they took only what they got, a shortfall of 22%. You come to consider the interest rate of 19.5% for the 10-year bond and 19% for the 7-year bond. This is no chicken feed. The interest rate is still very, very high. And for those who read on these matters and those who follow these matters, this is not an interest rate which you would argue that is one of the lowest, or is an interest rate which is not attractive to investors. So that argument that perhaps if we had gone for 30%, 40%, yes, you can make that argument. But 19% is no mean interest rate. And so that point has to be stressed. But I said that I will return to government's own duplicity. And I need to make that point, Peter. Today, this country is discussing bonds. We are discussing loans and how the MPP has failed, the MPP government has failed to meet its target. A few months ago, when they were in opposition, I believe that Ghanaians would not have imagined that an MPP government formed will be leading us to discuss issues to do with bonds, with borrowing. And I refer to one of the numerous lectures of His Excellency Alhaji Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia on the 24th of March 2015, where he described the previous government's smart borrowing arrangement, as the Honorable Setekpe christened it. He described it as, or he likened that smart borrowing concept as NDC being smart drunkards. And he said that to him, no form of borrowing, no type of borrowing arrangement can be described as smart. To him, Ghana's economy is in crisis, which there should be no form of borrowing, whether it's smart borrowing or not. And he put out the analogy of the drunkard who has been told that any more alcohol will be inimical to your health, so don't drink at all. And then the drunkard says that I will do smart drinking. So Dr. Bawumia said that, look, the drunkard will still die. The drunkard is not listening to doctor's advice. And so he argued at that lecture at the Central University on the 24th of March 2015, that that's what the NDC, the handlers of the economy under the NDC era, were engaged in. They were just refusing to listen to doctors and finding all kinds of so-called innovative ways, which still amounts to borrowing, which still amounts to drinking. And so we are just going to die. And he just labeled us as smart drunkards on the 24th of March 2015. So many Ghanaians who today are saying that, why are we even having a discussion on borrowing? Are right. They have justification to raise this concern. Because if at the time Dr. Bawumia had said that borrowing can be good under some circumstances, that no government can develop without some kind of borrowing arrangement, it should depend on how responsible the borrowing is. It can't depend on what you are going to use the money for. Then you will have made a principled argument. You will have engaged in principled politics, and you will not be taken on in the way that many have taken him on, and his credibility, which clearly is waning, will not have taken a hit the way his credibility has been affected. Then there's also the issue of ESLA itself, the energy sector levy. Remember that the energy sector levy was opposed by the MPP when they were in opposition. Indeed, the current energy minister is on record to have said that one of the first things an MPP administration will do will be to abolish the energy sector levy. He was emphatic. He was crystal clear. So if Peter today energy sector levy, which the NDC started, which was despised, which the MPP government said, the MPP in opposition at the time, said that they will abolish, has now become the cornerstone, the foundation. What do you call that? Clearly, Peter, we need to move into an era of principled politics. We must end the duplicity. We must end the hypocrisy. We must stop the double standards. But Peter, we cannot have this discussion without spending time on the revelations which the minority made as part of this bond issuance, which has to do with the fact that the highest expenditure amount ever in the history of this country in raising bonds of 177,241,976 cedis was spent in raising this failed bond. $177,241,976 cedis is in the history of this country. To spend this amount of money to raise this bond. And what is even shocking, Peter, what is shocking is if you look at the breakdown, 80 million Ghana cedis, 80,951,000 Ghana cedis spent on administrative expenses. And what is administrative expenses? Hotel bills, flight tickets. Clearly, people were flying first class and all of that. But even that, 80,951,000 just on administrative expenses. Peter, this is a big scandal. 700,000 Ghana cedis for legal fees. 700,000 for legal fees. One law firm, one transaction. 700,000 cedis. And I am told that I haven't checked, but I'm monitoring on social media. It appears that the cat is out of the bag. The legal firm is now known. And I'm told that there are interesting discussions happening. But I will leave that for now. I believe that you in the media in the coming days will follow these matters further. The arrangers charge 87,500,000 cedis. A whopping 87,500,000. Reporting accountant took 350,000 cedis. Printing and miscellaneous 400,000 cedis. We don't know what they were printing. I mean, you print a few copies of prospectus. 400,000 Ghana cedis. That's 4 billion old Ghana cedis. Of course, there are the statutory fees, the GSE application fee, that's 1.6 million. GSE, that's the Ghana Stock Exchange listing fee of 800,000. The Securities and Exchange Commission fee of 3.5 million. And the CSD of 1,440,000. So, eye-popping amounts, mind-boggling. We in the minority have served notice that in the coming days, we'll be summoning the Honorable Finance Minister to provide details. This arranger's fee of 87,500,000. Ghanaians deserve to know the breakdown. The administrative expenses of 80,951,976 cedis. Ghanaians deserve to know the breakdown. How many people took this money? What kinds of hotels? How many places did they fly to? We need to know. Especially to the extent that this is not the standard practice. I heard the Honorable Atufosun say that if you look at what has been the average, it's been about 0.2% of the bond raised. That's what has gone into the expenditure for raising the bond. But this one is about 1.7%. So clearly an outlier. Ghanaians need to know what is happening, especially under a president who promised us that he will protect the public purse and that they will ensure that wastage is addressed. We need to know what is happening. And I have been totally shocked at the response. There's another matter I must. So just give me 5 minutes, please. Just 5 minutes. I heard Dr. Mwaku, the technical advisor to Dr. Baumia, Dr. Gideon Mwaku. He said that, this ESLA PLC is a corporate entity, so let's go and ask ESLA PLC. Government cannot provide a breakdown. Shocking. I couldn't believe my ears. ESLA PLC it's not a private company. It's not Peter Banfu and Sons. And Peter Banfu and Sons went for their loan or they are using their own money. This is taxpayers' money, for Christ's sake. It's a public limited company. Public entity. So we will not buy that response. And it is important for government to understand that when you have engaged in such a failed enterprise, targets could not be met. Meanwhile, we have not yet even discussed how we are going to retire the energy sector debts. If what we have raised will be enough, and what other contingent measures we can put in place to avoid energy crisis and all of that. Doomsor has continued. How do we make sure that these revenues we are raising addresses that permanently? And then what we are seeing is that we are rather engaged in expenditure which so far, on the face of it, you cannot justify. Mind-blowing expenditure. 80 million on just administrative expenses. Just administrative expenses. Legal fees, 700,000. Legal fees for a bond that all the advice that was given. I mean, the transaction advisors were told that, why don't you consider a plain vanilla? That advice was ignored. Why don't you rather raise a sovereign bond instead of a corporate bond? That advice was ignored. Why don't you rather build consensus on even how long ESLA will last, the duration of ESLA? So you could not inspire confidence. You raise a bond which shows that there was, confidence in Ghana is at an all-time low. And yet this is what Ghana is going to pay for it. 177 million Ghana cedis. And you think there's justification? And you think Ghanaians do not have to ask questions? Finally, Peter. Finally. Linked to this discussion is a creeping tendency in this country to want to gag free expression. A tendency that seeks to segregate, that seeks to profile people. If you look at the constitution that we operate, free expression is unfettered. The Constitution is very, very clear. Every Ghanaian has the right to prefer an opinion. Every Ghanaian has the right to comment on issues. What the Vice President's advisor and other MPP communicators have engaged in this week is most despicable. They go for people's academic backgrounds, academic profile, and they've been doing that to Honorable Isaac Adongo, Honorable Atu Fosin, and then they compare him to Dr. Baumia, who they say is the greatest economist the world has ever known. And so they say that who are these people to talk when Dr. Baumia is head of economic management team? Such arrogance, such unconstitutional conduct, undemocratic conduct. So if Dr. Baumia is all-knowing, so knowledgeable, why is he the vice president? They should swap. He should be the president. And His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, maybe we may beg that he qualifies to be vice. What is happening in this country? And what will we say about the professors in economics? Professor Emerituses in economics. What will we say about them? That is what our leadership and governance has been reduced to now. It should be about what chains of degrees, level of education, before you can be allowed to comment on national affairs, before you can be heard. What kind of arrogance is that? And I think that the creeping arrogance, the naked arrogance, is now offensive, Peter. It's now offensive. And we need a national discussion on this. In any case, Peter, in any case, what really is education? Is it just about your certificates? Is it just about how long you have spent in school? Or is it about the contributions you can make? How you can help bring progress to society? How you can improve the quality of humanity? You'll be amazed, Peter, that some of the greatest people the world has ever known, Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb, he just spent 3 months in high school. The Wright brothers, they never graduated from high school. They invented the aeroplane. They are behind the flying machine technology. The Wright brothers never graduated from high school. I'm not talking at university. Bill Gates spent only 2 years at Harvard, dropped out. Founder of Microsoft. Bill Gates has been on the Forbes rich list #1 for the past 24 years. Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, spent only 1 year at the University of Chicago and dropped out. Michael Dell, founder of Dell, only 1 year at the University of Texas and dropped out. He doesn't even have a first degree. Co-founder of Microsoft, Paul Allen, just did 2 years at the University of Washington, dropped out. Steve Jobs, only 1 year at Reed College. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, only 2 years at Harvard, dropped out. And we can't live our lives today without the contributions that these people have made. Finally, I beg you, finally, let me just quote from Lee Kuan Yew when he was asked to talk about his philosophy of his educational miracle in Singapore. You know, Lee Kuan Yew would not qualify to talk in Ghana these days under the MPP government because he doesn't have the long chain of credentials. But look at what he did in Singapore. Look at how he's transformed that country. This is what Lee Kuan Yew said as I end. In the long run, it is the quality of our youths that will determine our future. And we have to invest in them more than any other sector. Changes are taking place in the schools. The emphasis is now on content and quality. We want our schools to produce citizens who are healthy and hardy, with a sense of social purpose and group discipline, prepared to work and to pay for what they want, never expecting something for nothing. Our schools will train students in the classrooms, in the playing fields, to make them healthy and robust. But even more important, they will teach our students high standards of personal behavior, social norms of good and bad, right and wrong. Without these values, a literate generation may be more dangerous than a completely uneducated one. Unquote.
Thank you very much. Dr. led to the redenomination of our currency. Maybe you forgot. Let me come up here. Dr. David Percy.
Yeah,
we don't have enough time, so we'll do this in 15 minutes.
Yeah, I hope I can brief. Thank you very much, Peter. You know, it is the duty of every citizen to understand the economy and economics. After all, it is a duty of every household to run an economy, much less a serious politician. And as for the nonsense about having a PhD, well, I mean, I can make a confession. I entered the University of Ghana in 1972. One of the most important discoveries I made was that you could have whole professors who were completely ignorant. It was the most liberating discovery. So we can deal with those things very quickly. But you know, more than 60 years ago, Nkrumah made the point about us seeking the political kingdom. And that was intended to be a prelude to us taking charge of our economy and our lives. Now, this morning we are talking about debt. Okay, one needs not go into the technicalities of this loan, bond, whatever you call it, but it's a function of the fact that we're a nation whose income does not balance our expenditures, or that what we need to spend on cannot be found from the income that we earn. And this thing has a primary root. The primary root is in the structure of our economy, the fact that we are engaged in unequal trade, unequal exchange. We exchange low value raw materials for high value imports. And in the course of doing that, export jobs and wealth out of our country. That remains the number one national challenge and task. Now, one can say without a shade of doubt that neither the last government of the NDC nor this government of the NPP intends to lead us to address this number one problem. The NDC is out of power because it did not put forward a program intended to address this that was owned by the people of this country, the working people. And for that matter, it deserves to be out of power. Now, they've been succeeded by a government that has come into power on the back of very lavish, attractive, some might even say sexy promises. I think I heard the Honorable using that a few days ago. Now, but it is clear, must be clear from what has been said about this bond. That you guys have, I'm not sure what the best label, but more or less you have a gang of crooks running our affairs, in charge of our kitty. I'm saying this against the bold statement by our president that he intends to, what was the word, what was the term he used? To, I'm looking for the phrase. He said he intends to, the public purse. He said something about the public purse, about guarding the public purse. Yes, okay. But is it not a matter of strange coincidence that a president who says that he intends to guard the public purse has put his cousin, who was also his treasurer, person in charge, who was in charge of his the financial arrangements for all his campaigns, directly in charge of the economy? And we all know about the goings on with the, is it $2.25 billion bond, okay, which have not been fully resolved. But there's a statement that was made by Honorable Okujeto Blakwa about a statement that ESLA is for all purposes a private company whose dealings and ongoings cannot be known to the good people of Ghana. So basically, our finance minister is fulfilling the first responsibility that has been conferred on him by the president, which is to superintend the collection of all debts that he owes to various persons in the course of financing his campaign. I mean, that is the only way one can explain away, okay? 80 million Ghana cedis, close to $20 million for administrative expenses. I mean, it is clear to me that this statement by the, is it the Deputy Finance Minister, that ESLA is a private concern. All you're going to have is a similar, an enactment similar to what we had when the Minister of Finance went before Parliament and said that the agreements or whatever it was that had been signed in relation to the 2.25, this thing, was a secret and confidential document. This thing can be only put out by a gang of crooks. But that's what we have at the head of our economy. No, seriously. Now, I can't see how any nation of self-respecting people can tolerate this for even 1 minute. That our Minister of Finance will have the balls to go before Parliament and say that an agreement that he has signed in our name for the purposes of borrowing money is secret and confidential. You don't need to go further. Now, you know, I go back to the point I made from the very beginning, that dealing with the problem of our neo-colonial dependence, the fact that our economy and our lives are under the control of others, is the first national task. But that situation is maintained by 3 props. 1, unequal exchange. 2, indebtedness, which is what we're talking about. And 3, the corruption of our leaders. So we must come back to the basics. We must recognize that these are the primary issues that we must address, that every Ghanaian working person must understand what is being done in his or her name and ask of our parties that they devise programs to address this urgent national task. But it's clear that we are not going to have that leadership, we are not going to have that program under this gang of crooks.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. David Percy. I'll come to you now, Mr. Kwesi Prajina. Let me just pick a few of the messages that I have received here. This one here says, A.U. Farouk in Tamale says, good morning to you, Peter, and to your able panelists. In fact, will the internal NDC context bring food to the poor taxpayer? Okay, I don't think that's related to the issue. The Vice President is failing big time, and instead of admitting he now wants to insult us that he has a PhD. Oh, Your Excellency, you have disappointed the investee that awarded you the degree. Yao Inkofuju sent that one. Musa Abatra says, good morning, Peter. You don't need a soothsayer to tell you that this Ghana Post GPS is stinky with corruption. In any case, why is Dr. Baumia uncomfortable when we mention 419 scam? Is he a scammer? How can you launch a whooping GPS system that is freely available on your mobile phones and say it is the best national addressing system? Hence, committed $2.5 million taxpayers' money without recourse to the diligence and without due diligence. And say we shouldn't talk about this glaring 419. Ghana is bleeding under President Akufo-Addo. Ghana deserves better, he adds. Good morning, Peter. Good morning, Peter, and your panelists. If organizing a demonstration today becomes a crime under GPS government, but is it the same conduct they used to come to power? He asked. Kofi Komsen sent that. Okay, I support Kofi Komsen from Stephen in Bethlehem, he adds. Good morning, Peter, and to your panelists. F.O. Newton from Kumasi Mankranso. The MPP must be ashamed about the way they went about this bond issue. It is very glaring that they are struggling to defend this smelly bond gate. It is very unfortunate. It happened under the self-acclaimed world best economist, Dr. Baumia. Bonds. The ordinary Ghanaian doesn't understand what bond means. So the MPP is deceiving Ghanaians and boasting they are not borrowing. Unlike the NDC who borrowed a lot, they only take bonds. The NDC should also explain to Ghanaians that bonds are a form of borrowing. This because the NPP in opposition promised Ghanaians that they won't borrow, and now they are borrowing. They want to hide it. Kwame Frafraha sent that one in. Alhaji Abbas Amogobo Onofenso says, I totally condemn the action of the 10 regional chairmen. JM does not need that declaration before winning. Let's all discuss the hardship the incompetent Anado government is visiting on Ghanaians. And the last one here says, Professor in Economics, Mr. Baumia, come and explain the Eurobond now. This is not 419 matter. Auntie Lucy and Wager send that one in. Mr. Pratt.
Well, Peter, thank you very much. For the avoidance of doubt, I want to state strongly that the only economics I know was studied in secondary school and eventually at the Ghana Institute of Journalism. I do not have a degree in economics. I have no PhD in economics. But I've learned about economics from the streets. And the views I express are not the views of an expert, at least not an expert with a PhD in economics. The 2.25 billion bond is a loan which the Ghana government was seeking to retire the energy sector debt. The $2.5 million bond is not a form of a loan, it's a loan. I've heard many people say that it's some kind of a loan. It is a loan, it is not some kind of a loan, it's simply a loan. Now, the energy sector debt has been accruing for about 40 years, 30 to 40 years. And I think it's important for us to understand how this debt has been accruing. I insist that some of that debt is dubious. You understand? And I would explain why some of that debt is exceedingly dubious. But over the years, VRA, for example, has been buying gas and crude oil to power its power plants. It has not been able to pay for the gas and crude oil that it has been buying. It buys them on credit, so the debt has been accumulating. Now, over the years, Gridco has bought power from the VRA and has not been able to pay the VRA for the power it has been supplied from the VRA, which it has sold to the ECG, simply because the ECG has failed to collect enough to be able to pay Gridco. So there's a debt which is owed to VRA also by Gridco. Then Gridco itself is owed a lot of money by the ECG because the ECG is not able to collect enough. So ECG owes Gridco, Gridco owes VRA, and VRA owes suppliers of gas and crude oil. The ECG itself is also heavily indebted. So that's also part of the energy sector debt. Then we have a situation where BOST is also heavily indebted. And one would ask how a company which was meant to store crude oil for the lean season came to be so heavily indebted. Now, over the years, it's important to understand that BOST has not been playing its traditional role. It has been playing some roles which were not assigned to it. So BOST, for example, at some point bought crude oil, and it bought it at a very high price. By the time it was ready to offload the crude oil to the consumer, price levels had fallen. So there's a huge gap, you understand. Then there's a thermal oil refinery, which is also heavily indebted. So the debt of the thermal oil refinery is also part of the energy sector debt. Then the private companies that deal in oil, normally referred to as BDCs and so on, government also owes them a lot of money. Now, government owes them a lot of money as a result of what they call forex losses. They buy their crude oil at the time that the foreign exchange is at a certain level. The CD to dollar rate is a certain level. By the time they have to sell the crude oil, the relationship between the CD and the dollar has altered, and the value of the CD has fallen. But they are selling at the same levels at the time when the CD was stronger. So there's a foreign exchange loss, which government has decided to pay. So that also becomes a debt. So in a nutshell, these are the debts which have accumulated, which are referred to as the energy sector debt. You understand? Now, the history of this debt is quite long. The problem with the debt is that they sit on the books of our banks and other financial institutions. And they threaten to collapse the financial sector. Because they are huge. The figures are huge. They are not being serviced and so on. Now, in 2001 or 2002, President John Adjei Kufuor decided to tackle part of this problem by imposing the Toll Debt Recovery Levy. So a tax was placed on petroleum products, which was to be collected in order to defray the toll debt. That was one of the strategies that President Kufuor adopted. Indeed, we have paid the toll debt for a very long time, and one is not even sure whether it is not part of the formula for fixing petroleum prices even up to today. Now, the Mahama administration decided that, look, our financial institutions are risking collapse as a result of this debt, many of which had become bad and so on. We were choking and so on. And that the way out of this problem was to introduce a tax, the Energy Sector Levy, otherwise known as ESLA. It was believed that if ESLA was introduced and collected efficiently, all of the energy sector debt could be retired in 3 years. And that in another year, we could pay off all the interest on the energy sector debt. So we had a 4-year period to deal with this problem of debt, if we applied ESLA. And so that was the strategy the Mahama administration adopted. Now, but earlier on, I told you that some of the debt is dubious. And I'll explain why some of the debt is dubious. If you talk to the economists who are working for government, all of the governments we have had before, Mahama administration, Mills administration, Kufuor administration, and even the current government, they tell you that some of these debts have accumulated as a result of subsidies for the energy sector, including the petroleum sector. Now, at one stage, I recall that in 1998, we did an analysis of the cost of petroleum to the consumer. In that analysis, we found that indeed the ex-pump price of fuel, if you took the ex-pump price of fuel, 50% of that price was accounted for by levies and taxes. Levies and taxes. The ex-refinery price was only about 50% of the ex-pump price of fuel. Now, what these people call subsidy is simply this. Government expects to make 10 cedis on every gallon of fuel as taxes and levies. If government makes 5 cedis instead of 10 cedis, they record the 5 cedis they could not make, which is part of the profit, as a subsidy. This is dubious in the extreme. There's no subsidy on petroleum products. In fact, there has never been a subsidy on petroleum products. It's dubious accounting, which leads to the declaration of this subsidy. I expected to make 10 cedis as taxes and levies on petroleum, a gallon of petrol. I'm now making 5. And because I'm making 5, the 5 cedis I'm not making is a subsidy and therefore is a debt. This is the dubiousness of some, not all, of the so-called energy sector debt. Now, this 5 cedis or whatever which is not being made by government as taxes and levies is then kept on our books as a debt. And we've kept this on our books as debt for many years. You understand? It simply doesn't make sense to me. It is dubious. Now, the Akufo-Addo government came into office, and I'm trying to be very short because we don't have a lot of time, and decided that rather than wait for 4 to 5 years to retire the energy sector debt, they would borrow to pay off the debt to free the financial institutions of the burden of carrying this debt, which has become an impediment to their development, which is obstructing their growth, which could lead to their collapse. They will take loans and pay off the debts at once. Now, it's important for us to understand that these debts keep accumulating every day. Every day, more is added onto the debt stock. Indeed, at the time that the Mahama administration was leaving power, the energy sector debt was around $2.2 billion. Now it is estimated that the energy sector debt has risen from about $2.2 billion to $2.3 billion. And that is because this is a debt which continues to accumulate. This is a debt which continuously is accumulating. Now, so we decided to go for the $2.5 billion bond in order to make enough money to retire the energy sector debt once and for all. That was the arrangement. To do this, we set up what has become known as ESLA PLC. ESLA PLC. And ESLA PLC is a shell company solely for the purpose of floating this bond of $2.5 billion. ESLA PLC does not have an office. ESLA PLC is a ghost company. ESLA PLC, to the best of my knowledge, is a letterhead. You understand? Now, no investor, because what we did was to say that, look, we'll be collecting this energy sector levy every time we buy fuel and so on, and if we do, we will use it to pay for the bond. So there's actually no company infrastructure known as ESLA PLC. ESLA PLC is a phantom company. You understand? Now, we set up this company, and it was obvious that no investor was going to invest in a letterhead. So we needed to do something more in order to give meaning, life, and weight to this shell company we established for the purpose of this transaction. Ideally, what we needed to do was to provide a government sovereign guarantee which simply says that, look, if ESLA PLC is unable to pay for the loan of $2.5 billion, the government of Ghana will take up that responsibility. You understand? The government of Ghana will take up that responsibility. Okay. But we did not go for sovereign guarantee. If we had to go for sovereign guarantee, we needed to go for parliamentary approval. What we simply did was that our finance minister wrote a letter assigning the revenue from ESLA to ESLA PLC. So it's a backdoor approach to providing a sovereign guarantee, which did not go to Parliament as is required by law. Because this is a foreign transaction. Yeah. You understand? So here we are. We have committed the energy sector levy, which was imposed for retiring the energy sector debt, to ESLA PLC. You understand? Now, this arrangement, what it also simply means is that if at any time the people of Ghana decide not to charge the energy sector levy again, those who have invested their money into ESLA cannot get their monies back. Because the guarantee is that when we collect ESLA, we will pay you for the loans you are giving us. What if we don't collect the ESLA? How do they get their monies back? You understand? This is a very, very important question. How do they get their monies back if we don't collect the ESLA? Now, there are some very interesting aspects also of this transaction that we need to look at very, very carefully. The normal terminology that I'm aware of is that we have transaction advisors.
Right.
This time, we are told that we have roadshow managers. I've done some checks. with friends and so on, who said that the roadshow advisors were essentially the transaction advisors. Now, why the change in terminology? What did we want to achieve? I'm not sure. But it's interesting that we did not want to use the normal terminology that we were using. So, for example, a letter of comfort instead of sovereign guarantee, roadshow managers instead of transaction advisors, and so on. All of this, I suspect, were deliberately, done. Now, whatever it is, we have also failed to realize the objective for which we went for the 2.5 billion loan. Bond, loan, they are the same thing, you understand? The purpose was to raise sufficient money to pay the banks off, so that the banks will no longer suffer the threat of possible collapse, so that the burden on the banks and financial institutions will be removed. We've gone to the market and failed to realize all the amount we needed to be able to retire the energy sector debt. So the energy sector debt, at least a substantial part of it, is still pending. That's the problem. So we haven't really solved the problem we sought to cure. Because if you look at the arrangement which was made by the previous administration, that arrangement was meant to pay the energy sector debt small, over a period of 3 years, 3 to 4 years. You understand? This arrangement, which was introduced by this administration, was intended to pay it off once, boom, finish. Because you've not been able to raise the money we wanted at one go, we can't pay off the financial institutions and the banks at one go. So that's a failure.
But they say they have 5 years to do that.
There's a problem with that claim. You see, the problem with that claim is that the prospectus we have presented will be changing all the time. And at the time we presented those prospectus, and now, changes have occurred in the economy which will require changes in the prospectus. Right. So we cannot be arguing that we have 5 years more when the situation will keep changing. One of the situations which has changed significantly is so-called investor confidence. The fact that we are unable to raise the money we wanted to raise at this time lowers the level of confidence. It sends a signal that something may be wrong with the Ghanaian economy. So that's a factor which did not exist at the time that this bond was floated, but now exists. Now, there's something else which is very interesting, which must address our minds to. You see, all of this transaction is based on the assumption that a certain amount of money can be collected within a certain specific time frame in order to pay the loan, in order to pay for the bond. That's the assumption. So volumes are important. Volumes of petroleum consumed is important. So, for example, if there's an increase in the price of petroleum products, and as a consequence, consumption falls drastically beyond a certain limit, you cannot be realizing the same amounts of money you anticipated to raise to pay for the bond. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. Now, I was speaking to some of my friends who say that they have looked at the figures, and some of the figures are dubious. You see, I keep using dubious over and over again. You know why the figures are dubious? Because the fuel consumption figures we are using are the fuel consumption figures for the era of Dumso. You understand?
Which is no more.
Which is no more. Because in the era of Dumso, we depended on diesel and so on to power generators, to provide electricity for our homes, to provide electricity for our work, and so on. So the consumption levels were very high. And because the consumption levels were very high, the tax levels, the tax collection levels were also very high. So now that they claim that you don't have doomso, it is to be expected that the consumption levels will drop. Now, if the consumption levels do drop, it means that the level of collection of the ESLA would also drop. And therefore, there will be a shortfall. Now, who is going to pay for that shortfall? Where is the guarantee that if you go and you get the $2.5 billion loan, you'll be able to pay for it through ESLA when indeed the collection levels will drop? This is one of the major problems the investors faced and so on. Now, there's an issue which has been addressed. Largely, I think Bernard Mona tried to raise that issue, and there are others who have tried to raise that issue, which is also a very, very simple matter. Should we be permanently dependent on loans in order to solve all the problems in the national economy? You owe money, then you go and borrow to pay. You need to produce food, you go and borrow money to pay. Whatever we want to do, we go and borrow money to pay. Is that a sustainable way of developing the national economy? Now, fortunately for all of us, His Excellency Dr. Alhaji Mahmoud Bawumia, when he was in opposition, made us to understand very, very clearly that that's a disastrous way of developing the national economy. Indeed, His Excellency the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, also told us that that's a disastrous way, a disastrous, completely disastrous way of managing the national economy. But in power, that is what they are doing. Borrowing to pay debts, creating new debts to kill old debts. That's all what this exercise is about. We owe, so let us borrow to pay. And in borrowing, we are incurring an extra debt of about 177 million. It doesn't make sense. I am not so sure that it makes sense. You understand? Especially this concept of borrowing to pay debts. And then, from the analysis I've made, when it comes to Black Stars, we will not be able to pay this bond. Because if you look at the figures that we are using, there is something fundamentally wrong with the figures we are using. So we cannot generate enough to be able to pay these debts. Now, let us ask ourselves, how come that this is the preferred method we are using? And there are many answers. But one of the answers which comes to mind immediately has to do with our deal with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. The IMF is insisting that our debt levels are too high and that we should not be piling on more debts. Of course, I disagree with the IMF. Well, if you look at the debt level of the United States of America, and America is still continuing to borrow, and so on, America's GDP to debt ratio is one of the highest in the world. And it is still borrowing and so on. You understand? What's your problem, Percy? Percy, what's your problem? State your problem.
Oh, go on. The statement that the US can print money to pay.
So what I'm saying is it not true?
We are not in a position to print money to pay.
You're just distracting me and it's unnecessary.
Sorry.
So I disagree with that proposition from the IMF. I completely disagree with that proposition from the IMF. But that is the deal we have made with them. And our government feels bound by that deal. So in order not to violate or infringe the agreement with the IMF and so on, they are doing all kinds of things. So they set up ESLA PLC so that the debt burden would be on ESLA PLC and not reflect in the government's account. They think it will not reflect in the government's account. But ESLA PLC, if you strip it naked, is government. So it's like dribbling yourself. It becomes a Cocoa Nancy story of playing games with yourself and everybody sees what the game is. Indeed, it becomes like the king's new clothes. Because everybody sees the nakedness of the king, the illusion is in the head of the king. Yes, ESLA PLC is government of Ghana. No matter what you do, is government of Ghana. And IMF can see it, I can see it, any financial economic analyst can see that this is a loan which is being taken by the government of Ghana. And it is for the same reason that they did not want to go to Parliament to seek approval for a sovereign guarantee, which would have anchored this loan on the finances of government. You understand? Yeah. Then again, I think in their heads, and this is speculative, they also thought that if they took it to Parliament, the minority will begin to raise all these kinds of questions which will frighten away the investors and make the exercise collapse. So they wanted to dodge the minority, they wanted to dodge IMF, they wanted to dodge everybody, and in the end, they dodged themselves. You understand? That's where we are. You understand? Now, I think that, like Nana Addo Akufo-Addo advised when he was in opposition, it is now more than necessary for all of us as Ghanaians to think through how to deal with the problems that this economy presents to us. Problems that the structure of the economy presents to us. Problems that the management style of the economy presents to us and so on, so that we find a solution which goes beyond grabbing loans left, right, and center in order to pay old debts. And creating new debts in order to pay old debts. It simply doesn't make sense. We need to change that paradigm. That paradigm has to change for us to move forward. And Master, we don't have enough time.
Sure.
So I think that's sufficient to
Thank you very much,
Mr.
Kwesi Pratt Jr. Because we don't have enough time, maybe when each of you will take the second topic and pick just one of the optional comments, and then we'll just wrap it up. I'll start off with you, Bernard Bonner.
The education topic.
Yes, so you take the education topic and then you'll
Let's look at that to start and then we can.
So we'll do what? Because he's having a.
No,
that's fine.
I will consider the limited time at our disposal and do this very brief. This week, the Honorable Minister for Education was in Parliament to answer questions relating to the implementation of the free SHS program. The question was filed by the minority ranking member on the Education Committee, the Honorable Peter Nochu Kotwe. In responding to the question, the Honorable Minister made a number of categorical claims which we have had to respond to. those claims have turned out to be outright falsehoods, blatant distortions. The first claim was that the progressively free secondary education program, which President Mahama's government started, there was no provision for the program, no budgetary allocation, and that the progressively free students were left stranded. The second claim that the minister made is that the scholarships scheme, which President Mahama had talked about when he was president, did not exist. They couldn't find the scholarship scheme. He said that he had called the scholarship secretariat and they did not know about the scholarship scheme. He had called headmasters, and headmasters said they don't know who the students are who were benefiting from this scholarship scheme. There are a few other issues which I will respond to later, but I'll take the issues one after the other. The progressively free secondary education intervention, as we all know, started in the 2015-2016 academic year. It started in fulfillment of Article 25(1)(b) of the 1992 Constitution. President Mahama had in the previous year's State of the Nation address announced to Ghanaians that having begun the construction of the community day schools, having worked tirelessly to expand access and improve quality at the second cycle level, he believes that Ghana is now ready to begin the implementation of the progressive introduction of free secondary education. And so it took off in the 2015-2016 academic year. Contrary to the claims made by the Honorable Minister for Education, Dr. Matthew Poko Prempeh, that there was no funding provided, I was compelled to issue a statement earlier in the week and put out all the facts. The 2015 budget provided for the program, and we know that the academic year is different from the normal calendar year. The academic year begins September, so the first term ends December, September to December. So if you look at the 2015 budget, an allocation of 12 million was provided, and indeed an actual release occurred. So 12.178 million Ghana cedis was released for the first term of the progressively free secondary education intervention. There was a second release of 17 million Ghana cedis. So we do not have one release, we do not have one payment, we have two payments. So the claim by the Honorable Minister that government, the Mahama government made no provision and made no payment, is not the case. It cannot be supported by the facts, and the Honorable Minister got it totally wrong. He misled Parliament when he made that assertion. On the second issue of scholarships, the minister clearly went talking to the wrong entity. When the minister said he had checked with scholarship secretariat and they couldn't be of help to him so far as the scholarship scheme at the secondary level is concerned, the scholarship secretariat is right. But the minister ought to have known, as we pointed out in our statement, the minister ought to have known almost a year in office that the full scholarship scheme for secondary school students was administered by the Ghana Education Service. A unit was established, chaired by Mrs. Dorothy Glover, a respected educationist, very hardworking and dynamic woman. So Mrs. Dorothy Glover has been the lead coordinator, and they have been administering the scholarships. So the Minister of Education ought to have known that the full scholarship scheme, which covered the entire bills of 10,400 students, 60% of them were female. 60% of them are female. So about 6,000 of the students are females. And in addition to paying for their entire bills, the school fees, we also provide stipends. And that's why you recall that earlier in the year I had said that President Mohammed's full scholarship scheme was better in terms of, if you look at the content analysis, if you do a content analysis, they received stipends. The students received stipends for transportation, school shoes, school bags, stationery, hygiene needs and all of that. So there too, the Minister of Education got it totally wrong. The sad thing is that the unit that administers the scholarship is there at the Ministry of Education. The GES block is the same block, the same building shared by the Ministry of Education and the Ghana Education Service. So the minister should have known. If he had been engaged with his directors, if he had inquired, he would have been told. The beneficiary list is available. I have all the names, and their beneficiaries are in 125 secondary schools. I mean, these are facts. If you went to the World Bank office in Accra, if you go to the World Bank office in Accra, you will be given these documents. They have reps on the scholarship coordinating team, and these scholarships are administered in a very transparent process. And that is why Ghana's Secondary Education Improvement Program has been hailed. Indeed, it will interest you to know that this Secondary Education Improvement Program that we implement, which continues, this government has inherited, is being replicated in Uganda and other parts of Africa because of the success story. So for the minister to have claimed that there are no students on scholarship and it's just a false claim and all of that, he got it totally wrong. And you see, Peter, I have made a point that you don't need to bring down your predecessors to shine. We have to acknowledge the contributions of everybody. I mean, before Professor Nana Jenopoko Ajiman was appointed Minister of Education, there was the Honorable Leo Kran, the Honorable Betimodi Drisu, the Honorable Peter Tetenyo, the Honorable Papa Oso Ankoma, the Honorable Osafu Mafu at some point. All these people have played their role. They've contributed their part. You don't need to bring down anybody, make false claims before you can, shine or show that you are of relevance or doing something to help education in Ghana. Just get on with the job. As we speak, free SHS is in arrears. If the Honorable Minister of Education has said they inherited arrears with progressively free, then he will have been accurate, because there was at least one term of arrears. That every government inherits arrears, inherits assets and liabilities. 2009, when the NDC came to power, we inherited arrears. Capitation grant was in arrears. Northern scholarships were in arrears. Remember that the President Kufuor government had announced the extension of the SHS duration from 3 years to 4 years. It could not make provision in terms of infrastructure, dormitories, classroom blocks. It did not provide textbooks. President Mills inherited this situation. The Minister of Education at the time didn't go to Parliament to seek to bring down the previous government. We went to work. And President Mills managed to get a coalition of local banks, a consortium of local banks, to put together funding. And we carried out emergency interventions in the secondary schools, dormitories, classroom blocks, textbooks. It was done. That's the approach. That's the attitude. In any case, Peter, as we speak, there's so many other projects, so many other accounts that we left. The secondary education improvement program, for example, $156 million. We have spent just about 30%. There's so much money in that account. The minister doesn't talk about that. We had raised funding from Kuwait, the Kuwaiti project that is going to, and I noticed they've just advertised they're going to expand facilities in schools. We raised that money. The money is there at the Ministry of Education. He doesn't talk about that. The GET fund is an NDC legacy. Every year it accrues not less than 750 million cedis, depending on our VAT receipts, 2.5% of VAT. It's there, it's available for use. So, I mean, the NDC did not just leave liabilities and, debts and no payments and all of that. Government is a continuum. You will certainly have some bills to pay. You inherit some bills. But don't distort, don't peddle falsehood. It is not true that no student is on scholarship. There are 10,400 of them in 125 secondary schools. It's not true that Progressively Free was not funded. It was never paid for. It's not true. If the minister said there were some arrears, yes, that would have been an accurate position to take. And then to say that because of that you are considering cancelling those interventions, well, the choice is really up to this current government. I mean, it will not be the first time they are cancelling an intervention. As you know, in the cocoa sector, they have cancelled the free fertilizer program. They've cancelled it. As we speak, cocoa roads, all the cocoa roads have been on suspension all year round. No cocoa roads have seen any construction. Eastern Corridor Road in the Volta region has been suspended. Virtually all the roads in the Volta region have been suspended. We were told that reviews are being carried out, but it's clear that there's a lack of fiscal space. I hold in my hands here the latest report of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the 8th volume, which was released just last month. And if you read this report, and I need to commend Dr. Dufour, he's doing such a great job with the Institute for Fiscal Studies. If you read this report, you would know that the budget which is coming 2018 is going to be such a hard year, tough year. All the revenue targets have been missed. The report says, and I quote, the first half of 2017 witnessed a worrisome fiscal performance. As Table 1 shows, domestic revenue fell short of the target for the period by 2.714 million Ghana cedis, driven mainly by a sharp drop in tax revenue. Tax revenue fell short of the target of 2.5 million, accounting for 75.8% of the drop in total revenue, caused mainly by shortfalls in income taxes and import duties. Non-tax revenue also fell short of the target by 527.6 million Ghana cedis, representing 19.4% of the total drop in domestic revenue. Grants from donor partners dropped by 352.4 million Ghana cedis during the period. To achieve the set fiscal target, the government cut total expenditure by 2.423 million Ghana cedis, with domestic finance capital expenditure, which has direct implications for economic growth, carrying the heaviest brunt. Domestic finance capital expenditure was cut by 592.5 million Ghana cedis, below the target, followed by expenditure on goods and services with a cut of 538.3 million Ghana cedis. So you notice that from this fiscal alert issued by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the government has been forced to cut down on expenditure. And that is why you are seeing that there is no fiscal space for projects to be carried out. So cocoa roads are not being done, Eastern Corridor roads, the community day schools in education. By now, we should have been hitting the 200 target if the NDC was in power. The 124 schools that we started, 50 was used to support the free SHS program. But for these 50 schools, only God knows what will have happened with the free SHS implementation. And yet we see all the challenges with the free SHS program. I had to go salvage the situation in my constituency this week when I had to go donate hundreds of furniture, about 200 furniture, marker boards and teacher furniture and all of that. So the point has to be made that the Ministry of Education will have to focus attention on the challenges with free SHS. You release 20% of funds, which was to last for just 4 weeks maximum. As we speak, they are entering into their 8th week next week. You promised them that you would release the remaining 80% 2 weeks after the first release. We've long passed that 2 weeks deadline that you gave. It's been more than 5 weeks now. And the schools that you visit in our constituencies and all of that, you notice that they are struggling.
Right.
So that is what government should focus attention on and not peddle falsehood. The final point as I wrap up, which is a very, very important point, which also came as a result of the minister's appearance. You know, the Honorable Amwete, very hard-working member of parliament, had filed a question about the future of the Somanya campus of the University of Environment and Sustainable Development as to when the construction will begin, because President Mahama had cut so. Do you remember that the President Mahama administration had raised funding from Brazil, 45 million euros. President Mahama cut short, but work was not going on. So the MP wanted to know what the bottlenecks are. And the minister came to explain that, you know, they had to address some drawing issues and technical issues. But he assured that work on the Somanya campus will take off by close of this year. So I got up to ask a follow-up question on information I had picked up, which I described as unimpeachable and credible, that the second campus, which must be sited in Donkokrom, according to Section 3 of Act 898, and I have the Act here, the University of Environment and Sustainable Development Act 2015, Act 898. If you look at Section 3 of the Act, campuses of the university, the Act states, the university shall be established in Somanya with campuses in Donkokrom and any other place as the council may determine, unquote. So it's very expressly stated that the two foundation campuses, Somanya and Donkokrom. Obviously, the minister avoided that question, but the media took interest, so I explained. The ministry issued a statement confirming that indeed the second campus will now be sited in Bonso, in the Achim area. So the cat is now out of the bag. That Donkokrom is out. But if you read the statement that the Ministry of Education put out, they sought to blame the Exim Bank of South Korea for being the people who chose Bonso. They are responsible for the choice of Bonso. And then they make the claim that when we were in government, we had proposed Donkokrom to the South Koreans and they rejected it. I mean, that again is another falsehood. We started talking to possible financiers. You remember that the vision when the NDC was in power was that every region should have a public university. So we established the University of Health and Allied Sciences in the Volta region. Then established the University of Energy and Natural Resources in the Brongafo region. The Eastern region is the last region left without a public university. So we promised in the 2012 manifesto. So as we started talking to financiers, the Ministry of Finance led us in engaging possible financiers. It emerged that for Exim Bank of South Korea, their funding would not be ready until about 2019. The Brazilians had some ready funding, $45 million euros. Now, the 45 million euros was enough for one campus, the Somanya campus, the first campus. So we went to Parliament, we got parliamentary approval. However, we continued talks with the South Koreans, and the understanding before we left office was that when the South Korean funded, which was about $100 million, the talks at the time, when the South Korean funding is ready, we will use some of it because it will be even more than necessary for Donkokrum, and then the remaining will be used to expand the University of Energy and Natural Resources. Because if you look at the two universities we established earlier, the one in Ho, the University of Health and Allied Sciences, is more has more facilities. It's more advanced because we got China aid to support us. But for University of Energy and Natural Resources, it was largely local resource, get fund resources. And so they are lacking behind in terms of the facilities that they really need. And by the way, they are performing wonders. You saw the daily graphic of Thursday. Yes. You know, now I want to congratulate the team at the University of Energy and Natural Resources. I'm sure anywhere Professor Mills is, he will be smiling now. But back to the point. So we will have used the money for the Dokokrom campus and then to expand the University of Energy and Natural Resources, because we were supposed to do the Agri campus, Doma, and then do the Fiapre campus. So that was the program. I am not aware that a financier will come to your country and determine for you where you should site a project. Ghanaians voted for the MPP government and not the South Korean Exim Bank. So clearly, you just see an attempt to just, muddy the waters. Then in the same breath, in that statement, if you look at paragraph 4 of the statement, they say that during the transition, we did not inform them that Donkokrom was a prospective site. We only referred them to Act 898, the University of Environment and Social Development Act, and told them about the Brazilian funding which had been secured. They accuse us of not reading. They are always insulting us that we don't read. But once you admit that page 22 of our handing over notes, we referred you to the Act. If you had read the Act, we shouldn't tell you. The Act is clear. Section 3 of the Act is clear that Somanya and Donkokrom. So I'm not surprised that as we speak, Peter, Donkokrom is up in flames. The MP has warned. The youth have issued statement. The chiefs are mad. They are livid. And rightly so. Article 17 of our constitution is very clear against discrimination. We have nothing against the good people of Bonso, the good people of Achim. We have nothing against them. If you look at the South Korean funding arrangement, as I've told you, it was enough to do Donkokrom and even expand University of Energy and Natural Resources. So if you don't even want to expand University of Energy and Natural Resources, what you can do is to do both. You can do Donkokrom and then do Bonso as well, because the Act allows for other campuses to be established. But your first two campuses must be Somanya and Donkokrom before you expand and then establish other campuses. So what the government is doing now is totally wrong. You don't discriminate. You don't engage in what I would describe as the AEC Boateng doctrine in such a blatant manner. Government must immediately put a stop, do a U-turn, respect and abide by Act 898. And what is shocking, Peter, is that if you read paragraph 3 of the statement that they put out by the Ministry of Education, they reveal that they have asked the South Koreans to go to site and commence work. Now, this is clearly an international financial arrangement. Article 1815 of the Constitution is very, very clear that such international agreements must come to Parliament. So apart from violating Act 898 on the areas to site the university where the campuses should be established, the government is in clear breach of Article 17 of the Constitution, as I said earlier, which forbids discrimination, and in clear breach also of Article 1815, which states, Article 1815, Article 1815 says that Parliament may, by resolution, supported by the votes of a majority of all the members of Parliament, authorize the government to enter into an agreement for the granting of a loan out of any public fund or public account. 5 states, this article shall, with the necessary modifications by Parliament, apply to an international business or economic transaction to which the government is a party as it applies to a loan. So you can't be asking the South Koreans to go and commence work, as their statement reveals, when you haven't come to Parliament. There are too many instances where this government, which says they believe in the rule of law, flouting the Constitution, flouting acts of Parliament with impunity, violently. I mean, it has to stop. So we have served notice that we are battle ready. We are going to resist this attempt. The only way is to come back to Parliament and amend Act 898 and delete Donkokrom. Tell the people of Donkokrom that they don't deserve a fair share of the national cake. So delete it and replace it with Bonso is the only way. If not, we insist that they should respect Act 898 and ensure that Donkokrom receives their fair share. Bonso can also. As I told you, the South Korean funding was quite adequate at the time we were leaving government. It's quite adequate to do a Donkokrom campus and then to do a Bonsu campus. And so that statement that they put out is most offensive to the people of Donkokrom. They've been very insensitive and they are clearly in violation of Act 890. It appears that they had not averted their minds to the law. And the Minister of Education is a member of Parliament of long years standing who should have known this, because I mean, if you were ordinarily attending to your parliamentary duties, you should know that we passed Act 898. And you remember that at the time, Honorable Atachi even ran into trouble when he said that the entire university should be cited in his constituency, the Achim area, and that there's really no need to go to Somanya. And I recall that the Somanya youth, really declared him a persona non grata in Somanya. So this is quite a popular law that was passed. The Eastern University is a popular project, and I think that the government must really come back to the path of righteousness, stay on a straight and narrow path, and do the right thing, and stop discriminating against the good people of the Afram Plains area.
Thank you very much, Honorable Samuel Okujeto.
But I don't think that I have to. I think Sami has said a number of things that I don't need to. First and foremost is to talk about the government-free SHS policies, and also to look at the challenges that it faces and the performances. I have said time without number that education cannot be a right. It cannot be a privilege. It should be a right to all citizens. And that is by virtue of education that rural folks like me are able to migrate and support national development. To that extent, education is very, very essential. Not maybe education to a doctoral level, but education that will allow you to understand and grasp the issues, even whether you have obtained a PhD or not.
How about the honorary ones? There are a lot of PhDs.
I'm sure that modern education, if you don't even add your own, you will just go to the universities, as we know, and read handouts without necessarily the education passing through. You just pass through the system, obtain a certificate, and which certificate you cannot even justify in most instances. So getting a certificate may not necessarily be education, as people want us to believe. So I think that education is key to many, many developments, bridging the gap between the poor, ensuring that people are able to appreciate government policies and other policies, and also contributing in no small way to national development. It is this that makes all of us excited that our government is beginning to appreciate that, look, education must not be toyed with. And steps are being taken, somehow a bit late, to fulfill the directive principles of state policy, which require that education must be made available. One of the things that I want to challenge Samuel Ablakwa and co. is that if you read the Constitution carefully, it says that 2 years after coming into force of the 1992 Constitution, a comprehensive program and plans must be submitted to Parliament to deliberate on how to manifest Article 25 and Article 38 of the 1992 Constitution. We are now 23 years into that period, and I do not know whether any comprehensive program has been submitted to our Parliament for them to discuss and to see how we'll be able to manifest the provisions of the 1992 Constitution. Maybe it is late, but it is important to call for that comprehensive program so that it will be deliberated by the people's representative to come out with this comprehensive program. The second thing that I want to state is that free SHS policy should be seen in its context that it is good. Implementation challenges should be obvious to all of us. And I'm not sure that this is the first time the people of Ghana are enjoying free education. Along the lines, we cancel free education for maybe our own inability to raise the necessary resources to fund the project. Resorting to free education is good. There are challenges. So far, the government of Ghana has released only 20% of resources needed for the full implementation of just first-year students at the senior high level. Second-year students are not beneficiaries. Third-year students are not beneficiaries. It is even disturbing that at the time that the government is not able to do this, there are contemplations on whether we should not extend the senior secondary education from 3 years to 4 years. I know many young guys that went into secondary school. They are professors today, they are doctors, they are engineers, who went to secondary school under the 3-year policy. And they are not shoddy doctors. So what is it that has made it wrong? If that were to be the case in terms of elongating our educational system, then let's go back to the old system of GCE O-level and GCE A-level, where you spend about 5 to 6 years in secondary school so that you can get the maturity that you want. You can have knowledge in almost every subject before at least you choose the courses that you want to study. But to just say that you want to increase it for political expediency, I do not think that that is the case. So there are implementation challenges. If you go to most of the schools, as of now, textbooks have not been received. Syllabi has not been properly provided so that teachers will know what they are supposed to do and what they are not supposed to do. And it appears that in some of the schools, yes, you have said that there is free SHS, but even the matrons and the caterers are unable to provide because resources have not been released to them. They are in huge debts. Their suppliers are on their neck, and they are not able to provide the basic things to ensure that we support these schools. The worst form of this is that most of the students are posted not into their communities because there is free SHS. And the government policy is that if you are posted to a place and you don't want it, then if you change, you will not enjoy the free SHS. People are posted into communities that there are no boarding houses. The cost of accommodation alone is far above what their parents or their guardians can provide. So when wards find themselves in such situation, what it means is that they may not go to school at all because parents cannot afford. So there is no free education for those people who have to travel from Sankana and come maybe to Donkokrum. You understand? So there is some challenges there because we do not have boarding facilities to cater for all these people that we have posted. And that is also a major challenge that we need to deal with. Of course, anything that you are restarting will face some of these implementation challenges, and it is important that we take note of these challenges and see how we will address them in order that we sustain the current policy to ensure that our pupils go to secondary school. As I have said at other platforms, let me state it here. It is of no consequence to provide free education for our young people at secondary level and then leave them there. When they complete secondary schools, they may not be competent to join any employment. They would have acquired half-baked education. They need to go further, and at that further level, they do not have what it takes to go further. So you cannot just curtail their education because they are supposed to go and look for funding somewhere and they are unable to do so. So we should be looking at, now that we've started free SHS, how are we moving forward to ensure that we get to the Article 25C, which is talking about tertiary education in all its forms, to ensure that there is progressive education at that level. I think Kujeto has corrected some of the statements that the minister made in terms of challenging scholarship, secretariats, and then that there was no money provided for, and he has provided the evidence here. There's no need to relook at those things. But just to say that governance is a continuum, and this persistent attempt by political parties and our leadership that anytime there is a change of government, every minister must look for things to demonize the previous government and what they have done. It's not healthy for our national development and national cohesion.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Bernard.
Yes, thank you very much. There really isn't much to say, and we don't have a lot of time. But in the course of the week, I saw an interview on television. I think it was on Joy News. There was an attempt, feeble attempt to question the Deputy Minister of Education, the one who was responsible for secondary education. I forget his name, but he said his son is a doctor something. And what had come up were the frightening conditions in a number of schools that the media had deigned to bring to our notice. But one can say, without much fear of contradiction, that it must by now be a common situation in many schools. Now, our government that has been in place since January of this year has replaced policy, planning, programming, and implementation with sloganeering. So, in this new age, we've come to understand that merely declaring something means that it has been achieved. Now, one cannot disagree with a statement made by Mr. Mona that every policy can expect to have challenges in its implementation. But that is when you've taken care to, as it were, think of all the possible problems that could arise. And you've taken adequate measures to deal with them. And then something else comes up. Because society and the system is dynamic. And new things come up. But how can we accept this excuse in a situation where things that could clearly be foreseen have not been planned for? I mean, how can you implement a system when, a system that involves boarding, etc., people using dining facilities, when those things are just not there? And in this news item I saw, you saw mattresses in the open. Okay, they're not even indoors. Mattresses in in the open. And then my wife exclaimed that, they said that there are not enough toilets and that people are using throwaway. Yes. No. It's a very serious matter. And here was this minister, very relaxed, saying that, everything is well, and that the reporter cannot just use one incident out of 700 schools to raise questions. And I said, my God. I mean, but, if one had any doubts previously, those doubts, at least for me, have been completely cleared. What the MPP intends to do is to make he's not prophet yet, he's the general overseer of the pastor. Yeah, he's a pastor. What the MPP intends to do is to make Pastor Otabil's statement completely true, that anything free is useless, or what's the effect. Now, if anybody has any doubt, those doubts must begin to be cleared now, that what we have unfolding before our eyes is a deliberate attempt to destroy public secondary education as we have known it, and to create a market for private secondary education. Now, what is going to happen is what we've seen happen with basic education. Parents, teachers, policymakers will struggle to find the means to send their children to private secondary schools and be able to guarantee them passage to the next level, which is tertiary. There will be free public secondary schools, but they'll be completely useless. If you take that route, you can ensure that your wards would advance no further in the educational ladder, or if they do, very few. And once again, would have been returned to the slave house, where only a few can afford to give quality education to their children. I'm quite clear in my mind that that is what we have unfolding right before our eyes, and that this is a deliberate policy to wreck public education and to create a market for private education. And we'll see the full results of this folly in a few months.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. David Pesik. I'll come to you, Mr. Kwesi Pratt Jr., and then we'll wrap up the discussion here in the studio.
Well, it's a very simple matter, and I do not intend to provide any elaborate analysis and so on. The MPP, its ministers and so on, ought to realize very, very quickly that they are in power. It seems to me that that is the problem. When you have a Minister of Education go to Parliament and say that the Progressive Free SHS program is not being implemented because there's no budgetary allocation. My goodness. It is a good program. Who will provide the budgetary allocation? Is it me? It is the Minister of Education, Minister of Parliament, and Cabinet. They are in power. So they should do the right thing so we can rest. The complaining is too much. They should stop complaining and do the work. That's all. Why? For the 2015-2016 academic year, budgetary provision was made.
Right.
The 2017 budget could not be completed and presented to Parliament because it was an election year. So they are in power. If they think that is such a bad program and they want to jettison it, they should jettison it and suffer the political consequences. If they think that's a good program and they want to continue it, please make the budgetary allocation available and let's implement it. Finish. There's no debate on this matter.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Kwesi Pratt Jr. And let me just see if I can pick one or two messages here, and then we can wrap up the discussion. ASK sent a message, and he says, okay, let me pick this one here from Baba Musa, and he says, good morning, Peter. Let me clear this off my chest. Some MPP fanatics have started questioning the academic credentials of Honorable KCL Atu-Forsing and Honorable Isaac Adongo just because the duo exposed Dr. Bawumia badly during the press conference by the minority. Let me ask this harmless question. What certificate does our president Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has, apart from his third-class bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Ghana? He, as our AG, a position which is reserved for lawyers to the best of my understanding of the 1992 Constitution of Ghana. Besides, I have heard people say he is a lawyer. I have no cause to disbelieve or believe that because I don't know, but he can honorably show to Ghanaians his law certificate, if there is any, to all, as His Excellency Emiza Atta once did when MPP questioned him or challenged him about his master's degree certificate. At least, if for nothing at all, it will put to rest the long suspicion that has been held. ASK says, is it not clear that government will have at least saved this country 700,000 Ghana cedis on legal fees if this bond was floated on a sovereign bond, which would have had the Attorney General handling all legal issues? It's obvious the government was bent on filling private pockets of his friends, hence the adoption of this mode of dealing with the bond, hence attracting this embarrassment. So those are a few of the messages that I have here. It has been Alhaji and Alhaji, their mother of all talk shows here in Ghana. We have been live on our affiliates, that's on Sekbele 104.3 FM in Likpe, on Shine 96.9 FM in Akachi, Lokosi Radio 96.1 FM in Vergolokwati, on Radio Kwando, that's on 102.5 FM, on SAPS Radio, and for those of our folks in London, we have been live on GFM Radio. Mind you, the issues that we have looked at today as being a critical analysis of the bond, the energy bond issues. We've talked about the impact on revenue generation and some allied concerns. Then, of course, we looked at the free SHS policy implementation and the performance as well as the challenges. Remember, the Minister of Education had made a statement in Parliament to the effect that the NDC government did not release funds to finance it progressively free education policy, and this has attracted some comments from those who have been responsible for that sector. Unfortunately, because of time, we could not pick the optional messages. My name is Peter Bamfo, and it's been great coming your way with today's edition of Alhaji and Alhaji. Hopefully we'll get to talking the course of the week. Meanwhile, I'm out of here. Thanks.